Okay. Good morning, everybody. Okay. My name is Dr. Sumit Shrestha. So I'm a lecturer at Department of Anesthesia and Critical Care in CMC. Today, I'm going to talk about this post-operative care, or we can call it as a post-anesthetic care. Okay, post-anesthesia care. So, so the immediate post-operative period is very crucial. Okay, because a lot of mishaps and complications may arise in immediate post-operative period. Okay, so as a doctor, you must be able to identify such mishap and complication. Okay, otherwise you may lose the patient. So I will begin the presentation with one of the critical incident that we recently faced in our operating theater. Okay, so this was a 27-year-old male, ASA grade 1, that is normally healthy male with no any comorbidities, and he underwent laparoscopic cholecystectomy. Okay, so after completing the surgery, the patient was shifted to the recovery room, which we call like post anesthesia care unit. Okay, then the patient complained of intense pain. Okay, at the surgical site. So the injection pethidine 50 mg was given IV. Okay, but soon after giving pethidine, the patient became unresponsive, cyanosed, and oxygen saturation dropped from 100 to 35%. So the attending nurse immediately called us. Okay, so when we went there, we assessed the patient, and the patient was apneic. Okay, this means that the patient was already under the influence of anesthetic drug. Okay, so which might have depressed the respiration. So on top of that, we added injection pethidine, which is an opiate. Okay, which further depressed the respiration. So the patient went on apnea. So we did bag and mask ventilation with Ambu mask, and the patient revived. So the timely recognition and management of complication that arise in immediate post-operative period is very crucial, and it can be very life-saving. Okay. So all the patients who underwent surgery or received any form of anesthesia must be admitted to a specialized unit, which we call post-anesthesia care unit. Okay, this post-anesthesia care unit is designed and staffed to monitor and care for the patient who are recovering from the immediate physiological effect of an surgery. Okay, the main aim of this unit is to resuscitate the patient who are unstable. Similarly, provide a pleasant environment for the recovery and comfort of the patient who are stable. Okay. So about the staff, okay, the staff is mainly consists of specialized trained nurse, which are skilled in the prompt recognition of the post-operative care, post-operative complication. Like the previous example that I give, is the sister. She was very trained, and she could easily recognize the patient was in trouble. Okay, so she immediately called us, and we could intervene the patient in the time. Okay, so this first is the specialized trained nurse, who are very skilled. Okay, which are very skilled recognizing the post-operative complication. Next is a doctor or anesthesiologist, which are on duty. Okay, so if you once you pass the final year exam, you also become intern. Okay, and in the during internship, you will be also be posted in the post-operative ward. Okay, so you should know what are the post-operative complications that may arise. Okay, so this is very important. So in the future, okay, you may be working in any surgical field, like you may be working in the obstetric. If you work in any surgical field, like in obstetric, ENT, neurosurgery, or urosurgery, you have to take care of the post-operative cases. So you must know what are the complications that arise in the post-operative period and the subsequent management. Okay, so in the post-operative care unit, vitals are recorded as often as necessary. It can be 3 minutes, 5 minutes, but it should be at least 15 minutes. So what are the vitals that we check? Okay, first is we check for the oxygenation. In oxygenation, we check the oxygen saturation. So oxygen saturation more than 90% is desirable. Okay, in ventilation, we check for the respiratory rate, airway patency, and capnography. Okay, in circulation, we check for the blood pressure, heart rate, and ECG. We also have to check the level of consciousness and temperature. So there are various phases in the post-operative care. First is the initial handoff phase. Okay. So in this initial handoff phase, anesthesia care team, they provide the handover to the nursing staff in the post-operative care ward, okay, in post-operative care unit. So what are the things they give the handover? They give the handover of all these items, okay, like name, allergies, past medical history, pre of medication, okay, anesthetic type, any medication like antibiotic, analgesic, antiemetics, okay. Next is the phase 1 care. It involves the patient's full recovery from anesthesia and return of the vital signs to the near baseline. Okay. Last is the phase 2 care, which is basically preparing the patient for the hospital discharge. Okay. It includes the education about the discharge medication. Okay, and any post-operative instruction. Okay. So about the assessment and monitoring of the respiratory function. About assessment and monitoring that we do in the post-operative care ward. First is the respiratory is very important. Okay, and respiratory we check for the assessment of the airway patency. Okay. So we should be very familiar with what are the signs of the respiratory obstruction. Okay, because if there is delay in recognizing the respiratory obstruction, then the patient may die. Okay, so first is what are the signs of the respiratory obstruction. So do you know what are the signs of respiratory area obstruction? So first one is the stridor. Okay, inspiratory stridor. So inspiratory stridor is the hallmark of the upper airway obstruction. Okay, next is the expiratory wheeze. This is the hallmark of lower respiratory tract infection. So beside this, other signs of the respiratory obstruction are signs the patient may be cynosed, okay, the patient may be tachypneic, there may be use of accessory muscle respiration like substernal, subcostal or intercostal traction, okay. There may be like abnormal breathing sound like snoring, gurgling sound or grunting sound, okay. So this is about the respiratory patterns. In the respiratory rate, okay, we should check for the respiratory rate. Okay, most of the patient post anesthetic patient are like under influence of anesthetic drug, so they are hyperventilating. Okay, the respiratory rate is low. Okay, so if the patient respiratory rate is high, then we should think that the patient may be in the pain. Okay, patient may be in the pain. Or patient there may be airway obstruction. Next is the oxygen saturation. Okay, we should be periodically check for the oxygen saturation. And the cardiovascular system, we have to check for the heart rate and blood pressure. So in neuromuscular function, assessment of muscular function should be performed for all patients who receive the non-depolarizing neuromuscular blocking drug. Okay. So how do you check the neuromuscular? Function? First is we have to ask the patient to cough or swallow. If the patient can cough or if the patient can swallow, then it signifies that the patient can protect his or her airway. Okay. Next is we ask the patient to make a hand grip. Okay, we ask the patient to make a hand grip. Next is we should ask the patient to lift the head. If the patient can lift the head for 5 seconds, then it signifies that the patient has a recovery from the neuromuscular blocking drug. Okay. Next is we have to check for the mental status. Okay, and next is temperature. We should also regularly check for the pain, nausea, vomiting, hydration, okay, hydration status, urine output, and last but not least, okay, yes, we should check for the drainage and bleeding, especially the surgical site, okay, so whether there is any drainage, so there is bleeding from the surgical site or not. So these are the various complications that may arise in the post-operative period. Okay, these are the list of complications. So whenever, like in the final year exam, you may be asked MCQs, okay. So in MCQ, the question may be, what is the most common complication that occur in the post-operative period? So your answer must be nausea and vomiting. Okay, these are the highest incidence of the. This is the highest complication with the highest incidence. Okay. So without prophylactic intervention, or approximately 1/3 of patients who undergo inhalation anesthesia will develop a post-operative nausea, vomiting. The range is about 10 to 80%. Okay. From the patient perspective, PONV may be more uncomfortable than the post-operative pain. Okay, so what are the sequelae that may arise from the post-operative nausea and vomiting? There may be delayed discharge from the post-operative care unit. Okay, there may be unanticipated hospital admission. There may be increased incidence of pulmonary aspiration. And there may be significant post-operative discomfort. Okay, so what are the various drugs that we can give for the treatment of nausea, vomiting? The first and the foremost is the serotonin receptor antagonist, which and the most common example is the ondansetron. This is massively used. Okay, ondansetron. Next is the vasopressor drug like ephedrine with hydroxyzine. Hydroxyzine is a antihistaminic. Okay. Next is the corticosteroid dexamethasone. Okay. Another drug is the anticholinergic like scopolamine. Okay, it can be given IV or through the transdermal patch. Next is the antihistaminic like hydroxyzine, phenothiazine, or promethazine. Okay, and the last one is the prokinetic agent like metoclopramide. Okay. So if an adequate dose of antiemetic medication given at the appropriate time is ineffective, then simply giving more of the same class of drug is unlikely to be significant benefit. So in such case, we should add another antiemetic drug. So let me give you an example. Okay, suppose in a post-operative pain, there is a patient who is complaining of post-op nausea, vomiting. So you give ondansetron 4 mg, okay, and it doesn't work. The patient is still complaining of nausea, vomiting. What will be your next step? So in your next step, there is no use of giving another dose of ondansetron, okay, because it is proven to be insignificant. It is proven to be have no significant benefit. Okay, in such case, we should add another class of antiemetic. Like example, we can add a prokinetic agent like metoclopramide. Okay. Next, another important complication that we can encounter is the upper airway obstruction. Okay, so what are the causes of the upper airway obstruction? It can be due to the loss of pharyngeal and muscle tone. Okay, this occurs if the patient is under the influence of anesthetic drug. Okay. Next is the residual neuromuscular blockade, or it can be due to secretion or blood in the airway. Okay, it can be due to laryngospasm, airway edema and hematoma, or obstructive sleep apnea. So, do you see what is the problem here? So this is the tongue. Sorry. So this is the tongue. Okay, and this is the airway. Okay, this patient has a patent airway. Okay. In this case, the patient is under the influence of anesthetic drug. There is a loss of pharyngeal muscle tone. So the tongue, here we can see that the tongue it fall backs. Okay, it fall backs and it has obstructed the airway. Okay, this is an airway emergency and it requires the immediate intervention. Okay. So the first maneuver that we do is the head tilt and chin lift. Okay. In this example, this is an example of this blocked airway. This is the tongue. Tongue has fallen down and it has obstructed the airway. Simply by head tilt and chin lift maneuver, the tongue is moved upward. Okay, upward. So the airway is open. Now this is the airway. We can see that this airway is open. Okay. Next, so I also forgot one thing. This head tilt and chin lift is contraindicated in patient with a cervical spine injury. So in such case, we do another maneuver called the jaw thrust. Okay, in jaw thrust, we put all the finger on the angle of mandible and thumb on the chin. Okay, the chin is slight upward and outward. Okay, chin is slight upward and outward. Okay, by this the tongue is lifted up and the airway obstruction is relieved. Okay, and another maneuver that you can do is put an oropharyngeal airway and nasopharyngeal airway. This will be discussed detail in another chapter. Is in equipment. Okay. So beside this, we have to treat any underlying cause that may be causing the airway compromise. Like if there is opioid overdose, then we can give antidotes, that is naloxone. Okay. In case of benzodiazepine overdose, we can give flumazenil. Okay. In case of this if there is residual effect of neuromuscular blocking agent, give neostigmine. If there is segregation of blood in the airway that is causing obstruction, then we can do a airway suction. In case of obstructive or sleep apnea, the treatment is CPAP, is continuous positive airway pressure. That this you will be studying in the medicine. Okay. Next, another important direct complication that we encounter is the post-operative hypoxemia. Okay, the most common cause of post-operative hypoxia is atelectasis. Okay, so I want to stress you one thing, that there's a lot of time when you go to the entrance exam, there may be one exam. One of this MCQ is very common. Okay, what is the most common cause of hypoxia? Your answer must be always atelectasis. Okay, the other cause is the mismatching of ventilation to perfusion, which can occur due to decreased FRC. It can be due to pulmonary edema, or it can be due to alveolar hyperventilation, which is due to the residual effect of anesthetic or neuromuscular blocking drug. Okay, another cause is the diffusion hypoxia. So diffusion hypoxia occurs if the patient is receiving nitrous oxide. Okay, so as far as I remember, okay, last year in your university exam, in final year exam, this question was asked in a short right or short not. Okay, diffusion hypoxia. So it's very important. Okay, I should study. So this will be discussed detail in the next chapter, that is inhalation agent. Okay, this will be discussed. Next is the inhalation of gastric content. There maybe it can be due to hypoxia, can be due to pulmonary embolism or transfusion-related lung injury or increased oxygen consumption that occurs with a severing. Okay. So pulmonary edema is the most common cause of the hypoxemia. It can be pulmonary edema can be cardiogenic or non-cardiogenic. So cardiogenic is mainly due to the left ventricular failure. That is, if there is an intravascular volume overload, or in case of congestive heart failure, there is left ventricular failure. Okay. Most often in the pulmonary edema in the posterior plate is cardiogenic in nature. And less common cause is the airway obstruction, which is also called as post-obstructive pulmonary edema. So this is an X-ray of the pulmonary edema. Okay, typical X-ray of the pulmonary edema. It shows the bad wing opacities. Okay, bad wing opacities, cardiomegaly. Okay, I think there is no, we can say any Corley lines. Okay, so the management of this cardiogenic edema is similar to that you study in the medicine. Okay? That is, it can be given by this mnemonic LMNOP. Okay, where L stands for Lasix. That is, you give diuretics. That is furosemide. M is you give morphine. Okay. Morphine, I give the morphine. N stands for the nitroglycerin, that is vasodilator to decrease the preload. O stands for oxygen. P stands for position. The position must be in the upright position. So one of the rare entities is another cause that you can see is the post-operative pulmonary edema. So normally during inspiration, intrathoracic pressure decreases. Okay, and when the intrathoracic pressure decreases more than the atmospheric pressure, the air is sucked in and there is an inspiration. But when there is obstruction right here, okay, the intrathoracic pressure goes on decreasing for the long time. Okay, so there is an increase in the venous return. This causes increase in the pulmonary blood volume. This causes the increased hydrostatic pressure. There is a translation of fluid from the capillary blade into system, which causes the edema. Okay, so in pathology, Robbins pathology, you have studied what are the mechanism of edema. Okay? You might know what are the mechanism of edema. So in Robbins, you have studied in the Robbins maybe. So there are four. First is the intra-hydrostatic pressure. There is a decrease in plasma oncotic pressure. There is increased capillary permeability and the lymphatic obstruction. So these are the cause of the edema. Okay. If suddenly leave the obstruction, then the intrathoracic pressure decreases further. Okay, which further aggravate. There is also increasing edema. So main treatment is always we have to relieve the obstruction, but we have to wait for a long time. Okay? Take 24 hours to resolve. We have to relieve the obstruction immediately and wait for the 24 hours. Okay? Another commonly encountered problem is the hypertension. Okay? This is there are various causes of hypertension. First is the preoperative hypertension. But when you are work as an intern, you must always think that hypertension in post-operative is always most likely in our setting is always due to sympathetic nervous activity, that is pain. Okay? If you it's most likely due to the pain. So you should always control the pain. The other causes, these are the other causes, you can go through it. Okay. Next is the hypotension. Okay. So there are various causes for the hypotension. First is the intravascular volume depletion, which can cause due to bleeding, okay, fluid loss, okay, ongoing throat space loss, or can be GI losses. Okay. Next is the increase in capillary permeability, which occurs in sepsis, burns, or transfusion-related acute lung injury. The other cause is the decreased cardiac output, myocardial ischemia, cardiomyopathy, valvular disease. Okay, these are other causes. Pulmonary embolism, okay, and tension pneumothorax. Okay, and another cause is the decreased vascular tone, which can be occur in a sepsis or in an anaphylactic shock. Okay. So myocardial ischemia, okay, this can occur in a very high risk patient. Okay, typically what we see the ST segment changes, T wave changes. That is, there may be ST depression, ST elevation, or T wave inversion. Okay, in ECG. So side by side by doing ECG, we also have to send for the troponin levels. Okay, whenever we encounter any myocardial infarction in post-operative care, we should always ask for the cardiology consultation. Next is the anaphylaxis. Okay, this is very important. Okay, in perioperative care, most common cause of anaphylaxis is mainly due to the muscle relaxant. Okay, that is we are using like succinyl choline, rocuronium, or atracolin. These are the most common cause of anaphylaxis in the perioperative care. Next is the rubber latex allergy. Okay, some people have got like if the patient they put like chemicals, okay, latex. Some people have allergy for this, okay, and they are also it can also be due to the antibiotic, okay. So about anaphylaxis, okay, this is very important, okay. As a doctor, you must know what recognize the anaphylaxis and treat promptly, okay. So what are the signs of anaphylaxis, okay? Firstly, when the patient has anaphylaxis, first is the patient are usually hypotensive. They are hypotensive. They are usually in a state of shock, okay. They are in the there may be tachycardia, okay. Initially tachycardia, but later on they can progress to bradycardia and even the cardiac arrest. Okay, there may be signs of the upper airway obstruction, like there can be stridor, wheeze, okay. There can be hives, okay. There can be facial swelling like angioedema. Okay, so how do you manage the anaphylaxis? Whenever you encounter anaphylaxis, first thing you have to do is the call for help. Okay, you have to secure the airway, give 100% oxygen. You have to secure the airway. Okay, and next is you have to stop any agent that is like if it's antibiotic is causing the anaphylaxis, you stop the antibiotic. Okay, and you have to stop the triggering factor. Next is you have to give the adrenaline. Okay, like it can be given 0.5 mg IM or 10 to 100 max IV. Okay, side by side we have to give antihistamine like diphenhydramine, which we also call the ABI. Okay, after that then we have to also give the steroid like hydrocortisone. Sorry. Okay, so these are the management of anaphylaxis. Next is the next common complication is the post-operative shivering. Okay, it is usually but not always associated with the hypothermia. Okay, so accurate core body temperature can be must be obtained at the tympanic membrane. Okay, so how do you manage the heat? If it can be managed with the first air warmer. I think you don't know what is the first air warmer. So whenever you are posted in the OT, just let us know. Okay, I will. So we have got this first air warmer in our operation theater. Okay, OT. So whenever posted in the OT, just let us know. Okay, we'll show you. The another is if the patient complains of post-operative shivering, we can give the opiates. Like most commonly given opiates are pethidine and tramadol. Okay, and then we can also give ondansetron, and another drug is the clonidine. Okay. So okay, delirium is also another complication. It's risk factor. It is most commonly occurring in the elderly. Most common risk factor is the elderly more than 70 years. Okay. So another risk factor is pre-op cognitive impairment, disease, functional status, alcohol abuse, and if the patient has the history of delirium. So incidence is always 10% in a patient is more than 50. Okay. The another is the emergence excitement. It usually occur in the children. It is a transient confusional state that is associated with the emergence from general anesthesia. It usually occurs in a patient receiving the general anesthesia with inhalation agent like halothane, isoflurane, and sevoflurane. Okay, emergence excitement is common in the children with more than 30% experience the agitation or delirium at some period during the post-operative period. Okay, usually occurs within the first 10 minutes and it typically resolves and is followed by uneventful recovery. So, in children, emergency excitement is most frequently associated with the rapid wake up from inhalation anesthetic. Okay, when you are using halothane, isoflurane, sevoflurane. Okay, so this is the last slide. Okay, this is basically criteria for whether the patient can be discharged from post-operative care to ward or not. Okay, so these are basically all the things we have already discussed previously. Okay? Basically, we evaluate we evaluate for the neuromuscular function. This activity means neuromuscular function. What is the patient can move extremity or not? If the patient can move extremity, then it signifies that the patient had recovered from the neuromuscular blocking drug. So he can safely shifted to the ward. Next, we check for the breathing. Okay, if the patient is able to cough, then it means that the patient can protect the airway. Okay, so breathing we also check. Okay, next is we have to check for the circulation. So BP, blood pressure must be normal. Okay. Next is we check for the level of consciousness. Okay. Last is we have to check for the oxygen saturation. That is, if the oxygen saturation more than 90%, then it signifies that the oxygen is adequate. So patient can safely shifted to the ward. That's all. Any question? Any question? Any question? Chat mo. China. Okay.